Howdy everybody, my name's Mike Montgomery, and today we're gonna be building this DIY outdoor fire pit coffee table on Modern Builds. I started by cutting the 2x4s that are gonna make up the internal frame of this fire pit to length, using my circular saw and my 12-inch speed square to make sure I got good 90-degree cuts. The finished dimensions of the fire pit I'm building are 56 inches long, 28 inches wide, and 18 inches tall. That's including the half-inch cement board that we're wrapping this frame with. In total, I need 4 pieces at 55 inches long, 6 pieces at 21 inches, and 4 at 15. And here you see me pre-drilling holes on the ends of my 56-inch long boards where I'll be butt joining these to the vertical supports. This is a really simple assembly, and I used wood glue along with 3-inch screws to connect everything. As I went, I tried to make sure everything was screwing in as square as possible, but without using any clamps, the boards could move a tiny bit when I screwed them in. Nothing bad, nothing more than a 32nd of an inch. And that's definitely within tolerance for this project. The second frame assembled the same as the first, and then I grabbed my Craig Rebel pocket hole joiner to create some pocket holes on the 6 21-inch long pieces that are going to be connecting this frame together. This is a new tool that Craig released recently. I've been using it quite a bit. I really like it. Next step is we're going to take our 2 big frames, and then I'll add wood glue onto the ends of these horizontal stretcher boards, and then connect them using 2.5-inch pocket screws. After attaching the first 2 boards, I flipped the fire pit over so I could attach the bottom supports a little easier. With each piece I added, I felt this whole assembly getting more square and rigid. Here you see me measuring 9 inches in from the outside edge, and this is where I'm lining up my internal support for the fire pit opening. The fire pit insert is a drop-in style, and I want to make sure the cement board underneath it is supported with some 2x4 framing, and that's why I'm adding these extra boards along the edge too. I drilled pocket holes on the ends as well as the joining edge of these boards so that I could attach them to every piece they're touching. But now you can really start seeing this take shape and where that fire pit will be. This is where I thought I was gonna stop, but I thought it would be a good idea to support this long span in the middle with a couple of leg pieces that I cut to the same 15-inch length as earlier. I'll just pop these in right here in the middle. This should add a lot of extra compression strength, even though it probably doesn't need it, but who knows? Maybe somebody could go standing on this coffee table someday, so I just want to make sure it'll be sturdy. And there's really only one way to find out. That's sturdy. Moving on to cement board. Since this project is going outside, I'm going to be wrapping the exterior of our frame with 1/2-inch cement board. This stuff scores and breaks easily with a utility knife, and there's also a specialty scoring tool that you can use for cement board, but this works great. If you try to cut cement board with any kind of spinning blade, it's going to create a ton of dust, so you'll want to avoid that. But once you get the hang of scoring and breaking cement board, it really is cool. On one side, you use a straight edge and a utility knife to score it a couple of times before flipping it over and then breaking it where you scored. After the break, you may need to use your utility knife to score the back of the board one more time before it breaks free, but this is all pretty straightforward and simple. And now we'll just screw this down to the 2x4s, and I'll use a couple pieces of scrap to make sure the overhang is consistent. If you've got 1/2-inch cement board, you want 1 5/8-inch screws, and that's what I'm using. I'm spacing these out 5 screws on each row where I can, making sure to stay out of the way of the fire pit area where we're gonna have to make our cutout. And for all of our side panels, I used a couple of shims to make sure that these are lifted up off of the ground just about 1/4 of an inch. I also made sure that the edge that we scored and broke is facing the top where there's an overhang, and the factory edge that's really clean is at the bottom. Screwing in cement board is a lot like drywall. You want to make sure not to go too deep because that can weaken the material, causing it to pop out. And before I attach the other end, I'm gonna cut away a little door panel, and this is what our propane tank is gonna slide through. To make this door opening, I used my jigsaw along with a clean wood cutting blade, and I definitely just sacrificed it because it was dull by the time this cut was finished. I screwed this final panel in, and that is cement board install complete. Now I need to cut a hole in the top where our fire pit insert's going. I made my marks by measuring in 7 3/4 inches along the long edges and 9 3/4 along the shorter ends. This should give me about 1/4 of an inch wiggle room to center my pan. And there's still one more cutout that we need to make, and it's for this metal plate that'll eventually have the gas regulator and the electric igniter. And I think I'll be putting it on the side, maybe like right here. First, I made an outline of this faceplate and then marked a line inset 1/2 inch all the way around that. And this is what I cut using another sacrificial jigsaw blade. It's not the most perfectly square cut I've ever made, but it still looks clean. And I'll use this fiber cement board tape on all of my corners to make sure that they don't crack over time. This gets embedded into the thin-set concrete that we're using and makes this all one solid piece once it's cured. It's mortar time. To coat the exterior of this fire pit coffee table, I'm using white Thinset mortar. This product is what you would use to connect tiles onto a shower wall or floor, and so I think it's gonna do great and be a waterproof solution for this outdoor environment. And what's cool is you can get Thinset in gray or white, depending on the look you wanna get. After a good remix, you want this to be thick, like creamy peanut butter, so it doesn't run. I'm obviously experimenting, but I've got a couple of trowels. I'm gonna start by loading up this one that's got the square notches on the side. My plan is to spread this Thinset across the top and then use the grooves to evenly distribute the Thinset all the same thickness across the surface. Then I'll be able to come back with the flat side and smooth it out. And that should give me a relatively consistent coat. And now is when I'm gonna switch to using these grooves. I'm gonna keep the trowel at the same 45-degree angle and spread this Thinset out. This whole time I used light to light medium pressure, nothing crazy at all. And now we're going back to the flat side and we'll smooth all of this out now that there's the same amount across the whole surface. You'll know there's enough pressure if everything flattens out. That seemed to work really well. Just putting a little bit of pressure, maybe medium pressure. And I wanna remember that this first coat is not gonna be perfect. With coat number 2 and 3, we're gonna be trying to get a more perfectly flat surface. But this is looking great so far. After the initial spread, I kept working this a little bit more until I found a point where I couldn't get it any flatter. That coat on the top looks so awesome. I'm excited to do the sides. Although I do wish I made my mix just a little bit thicker because I knew it was gonna run on me on these vertical planes. It's still totally workable, but it's gonna be a little bit tougher to deal with. Eventually I got the hang of it. That spread so well, I might not do the grooves on the verticals. I'm gonna see how well I can get it to spread. It was a little bit of a battle using this slightly thinned out Thinset, but I really was surprised how flat of a surface I was able to create eventually. I want the top to be a lot closer to dead flat in case anybody places a drink or a plate on the edge of the coffee table, but the sides don't need to be quite as perfect, and any trowel marks are just gonna add to that handmade quality. I found I got best results by spreading all of the material, then doing long passes across it horizontally, then vertically, and then back horizontally to finish it out. All we've got to do now are our 2 sides, and at this point, I was really moving and grooving. I was happy with the amount of flatness and smoothness I was able to create. There were still some negative spaces in the corners, and as I worked, I realized that if I build these up, that's a lot better than them being low. I definitely took that lesson going into coat number 2. But anyways, here is what it looks like after the first coat. It is far from finished quality, but we're gonna go ahead and sand this down and smooth down the high points before coat number 2. I let this cure overnight so it sanded really fast the next morning, and my main goal, like I said, was just removing the high points. I don't want to dig down into the Thinset that we're building up. But after this transformation, I was hyped with how it looked. And really quick, I want to check how flat we are. Wow, that looks really good.
Same on this side.
And so that means our idea of using the square notches and then smoothing everything out did distribute our first Thinset coat evenly. The only downside is some of the mesh tape floated on the corners, and I've got a few negative spots to fill up. So the plan is to do a second coat the exact same way as the first, and hopefully this will get rid of any low spots, negative spaces in the corners, or mesh tape showing through. I mixed up this batch with just a little bit less water, and then it was time to apply. Immediately, this worked way better. It wasn't trying to fall off my trowel as I was walking to the other side of the fire pit. And again, just like on coat 1, I'll use the square notches of the trowel to evenly distribute the Thinset on top. And now with medium pressure, I'll use the flat trowel to get rid of the grooves. And that looks pretty super pro. With coat number 2, I found my stopping point much quicker. I found there's really a point of diminishing returns where if you keep working it, it's not gonna get any flatter. This batch is a little bit more stiff, and that's really helping on this vertical. The other thing I didn't try to worry about is trying to make perfect 90-degree corners. Instead, I really let them build up, knowing I could sand them down. Just don't go overboard because you do see sanding through different layers of Thinset. I'm pretty sure coat 2 is just about ready to sand. I want to take down any of these chunky corners and any high points on our flat surfaces. I'm going to be using 220 grit instead of 150 this time, and my main goal is to not sand far enough to expose any of that mesh on the corners. I unfortunately didn't let this cure long enough because you can see where the red color from my Diablo sandpaper bled out into the Thinset where there was still a little bit of moisture. This just happened in a couple of places, but my plan now is to do a final feather coat across the whole surface, this time not doing the whole groove method before smoothing out the Thinset. I'm trying to create the smoothest, thinnest feather coat I can. And I'm crossing my fingers I don't re-expose that red pigment that came off the sandpaper. And spoiler alert, it did in just a couple of places. For the most part, I was able to use 150 grit to sand down the faces and all of the corners of this fire pit for a super clean look. I used light pressure so I didn't break off any of the mortar, and in just a couple spots where I exposed a little bit of red pigment, I used my belt sander to remove that hardened section, and then went back to my random orbit sander to feather out that repair. And it ended up working great, thankfully. Okay, I am very excited with how this has come out. I'm trying my best not to be a perfectionist. If I knew the sandpaper was gonna be an issue going into this project, I would have purchased some white sandpaper from Amazon. And that would hopefully make it to where I'd avoid that whole red and purple fiasco. But now I think it's time to seal this bad boy just to protect it a little bit against the elements. And to do this, I'm using a low luster masonry or paver sealer that I used on a previous project. I had this laying around the shop and it seemed like it would be the perfect product. It worked out really good. The first coat just soaked into the Thinset, and then the second coat created a little bit more of a film layer on top. And I think that's really gonna help with waterproofing and just keeping it resistant to the elements. And stain resistant too. My next big step is making a door for the end of the fire pit where the propane tank slides in. And I'll be using this thermally treated ash decking after I rip a straight edge on this on the table saw and then cut my boards to length. I really like the deep color that this wood has. I think it'll be a cool contrast to the light colored concrete that we've got throughout the rest of the project. I glued up the panel, and while it was drying in the clamps, I added a couple of support blocks into the corners of the opening for the propane, hopefully making it to where it won't be in the way of getting it in and out. And then after the glue had time to dry, I used my speed square and circular saw to trim it to its final width. I also used my drill and a Forstner bit to create a little finger hole that'll make opening and moving this door easier. Right now, I'm just going for something quick and simple, and this seems to work well. I sanded everything with 150 grit, making sure to round over the edges, especially in the finger hole, then I tested the fit. And this is where I made a mistake. Well, I'll have to glue that. Dang it. The long-term plan is to not use screws, so I was just bummed that I split the wood while I was working on the project. While that went back in the clamps, I grabbed my metal faceplate that the propane regulator and the electric igniter mount into, and I screwed that into the 2x4 framing inside of the fire pit. And now it's time to carry this to the back deck. I've got no idea how heavy it is. We'll let you know. Oh, that's not bad. It's probably like 150, 160. I feel like I'm holding about 80 pounds.
Yeah, that's good.
And the whole portability factor of this project is huge. I wouldn't want to have to move this all the time. It's really not that bad though. I thought it was gonna be heavier. And we screwed some 2x4s on the feet so we wouldn't crush our fingers putting it down. Real quick, I'd like to give a big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring today's episode. Squarespace is your one-stop shop to build your own website or online store, and that has never been easier with their cutting-edge design tools like Blueprint AI, Squarespace's AI-enhanced website builder. Plus, you can get discovered fast with Squarespace's integrated SEO tools. They do all the technical back-end work to make sure that you show up more often on search engines, leading to more customers. With Squarespace Invoices, you can impress clients with on-brand invoices and streamline your workflow from proposals to contracts to invoice and seamless online payments all in one place. And finally, with Squarespace email campaigns, you've got all the tools you need to engage your clients, promote your services, and build your business built in. So to learn more, make sure and follow my link down in the description. That's squarespace.com/modernbuilds, where you can build your site before entering any of your credit card info. And then when it's time for your site to go live, don't forget to use my code ModernBuilds for 10% off your first site, store, or domain through Squarespace. I am loving the texture that we're getting in the natural light between the smoother and the slightly rougher parts. And now it's time to install the fire pit insert. And this is from Vivor. They make a lot of good stuff on Amazon. I bought it with my own money. I think it costs like $100. And it looks like it fits perfect. And there's about a ½ inch of wiggle room. Once I get the rest of this connected, I'll probably silicone this in. The one thing I don't like about this is the insert's right here in the middle, and that might get in the way of our propane tank. And now this piece comes apart, and this piece that screws on goes on the outside of this faceplate. You know, maybe this is the point in the project where I should say, maybe don't even try this at home. If you're working with propane gas and you don't know what you're doing, it could be really dangerous. It's flammable, it could make explosions, so just don't do anything you're not comfortable with. I consulted the directions, and it says that I need to use this air mixer valve, and that's gonna make this stem even longer. And the reason this is such a bummer is I got a specialty propane tank to accommodate this lower profile design. Once all this is attached, I don't think it's gonna have room. I'll show you in just a second. I was a little bummed because I didn't think of this problem during the planning phase, and I probably should have. I really should have checked and tried to get a burner with an intake on the end, if they have it. And this horizontal propane tank is kind of the secret to this whole design. Instead of needing to be stored vertically where there wouldn't be enough room with a traditional tank, which is 18 inches tall, this one only sits 12.5. And it's a 30-pound container instead of a traditional 20-pound container, which is like what you would use for a grill. Even though I didn't think it would work, I still hooked it up and tried to see if I could get this tank to fit. And guess what? It looks like it'll still work if I place this on an angle. It barely fit, but hey, I can't believe that worked. I'm so happy this is gonna fit. Let me go ahead and take off these feet that we've got that were protecting our fingers when we moved this thing. The 2 feet on this side unscrewed easily. Awesome. But I had some trouble with the last one. That's not good. I decided just to use the sledgehammer and then cut the screw with the angle grinder. You know what? Sparks and propane. I think I'm gonna move this tank and then cut this screw. Oh, and I realized I never said this, but I'm gonna leave a link down below to the tools, materials, and supplies that I used. And I love that. The bottom's just floating above the ground, about 1/4 inch. Now it was time to load this tank up and get it ready for the final test. Then drop the insert right in the center, and then turn on our propane at the tank, as well as right here at the control panel. And until I get this figured out, we'll use a lighter and turn it on. Whoa! It works! And if I turn it down, you can get a low flame, or you can really have it kicking. Fire! Before I get carried away though, I'm just gonna turn this off, so that we can go get our door installed. And this DIY cement-looking Thinset concrete fire pit that's also modern and low profile is complete. Behold, fire! So my expectations going into this project were pretty low. I really had no idea how this Thinset would behave and what it would end up looking like. But now that this fire pit coffee table is complete, I can say I am very excited with how it looks. I love the modern finish, everything looks super contemporary and handmade at the same time. There's a nice texture to everything, but with that clear coat we applied, it's all smooth to the touch. Let me know if Thinset's something you would use down below. And seriously, thank you everybody for watching. If you build something like this for yourself, I would love to hear about it. Tag me, send me a message on Instagram @modernbuilds. Aside from that, make sure and leave me a comment down below, and if you're new, click that subscribe button and the notification bell. And we'll see you next time on Modern Builds. Bye everybody.